Hello, everyone, and welcome to Main Street Swim with Jim. Today, we're really excited to have on our interview show Elizabeth Potts Weinstein. Elizabeth, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
And Elizabeth, if you read the information on her in our content below, is a small business attorney. And in fact, for full disclosure, she's our firm's small business attorney, because Main Street is a small business. But we're growing, and we're going to get bigger. End of year planning and planning for next year is important for us personally, and also a significant number of our viewers and our clients are small business owners. So we thought we'd have Elizabeth come in today, and although that tax bill is not signed into law as of today, December 18th, it looks like it's pretty well set. So Elizabeth, here's the first question. How will the new tax bill affect small business owners?
Yeah, and it's a simple question with a complicated answer, because as of the time we're talking about this, the tax bill, it's not completely set, and the details as last time I looked at it, they kept tweaking details of how it applied to small businesses. And the details really, really matter for how it's going to affect us. And just to kind of give everyone an idea, my clients tend to be very, very small businesses. So I have clients who are literally just one person. And I have clients who are, two people, who are business partners. I have clients who have 15 employees, 25 employees, things like that. So they tend to be really small businesses, and these are the businesses where those little details are going to make a huge difference, both in how the tax bill itself is structured, and then how the IRS regulations are written, which we're not going to know for a little while anyway. And the weirdest part is the tax bill is going to be effective as of January 1st, 2018, and we're not going to have the regulations yet for some
is
time
that the
after.
way the government usually works?
Yes, of course. So we have to just kind of guess things. So I even have a client where we're forming an entity, and how that's going to work. I think we're doing the right thing, right? And I've made a full disclosure on I think we're doing the right thing, but we're going to hope. So and the reason is to give, I think some people kind of know one of the things that they're changing is that pass-through businesses. So if you kind of the classic pass-through business is an S corporation. So if you form a corporation, you can choose how you want it taxed. You can choose it to be taxed as a C corporation, which is like how big giant businesses are taxed, where it actually pays its own tax returns, and their tax rate is going down by a lot, and that's one of the big things that's happening in the tax bill. Or it can be taxed as an S corporation, and classically how that has worked is that the taxes are passed through to the owners, and the owners actually get a K-1, and then that's on a separate form, and then the owners would pay ordinary taxes on that. They don't have to pay self-employment tax, which is a cool thing, but you have to pay ordinary income tax. So the idea is that under the new tax bill, that there's the short way of describing it, a different way that tax gets passed through, that there's this like deduction on the ordinary income rate. But how that works is unclear. So, and I say that because they keep changing it. They keep changing who gets that rate. And then how it's going to be defined by the regs may also change. So the last version was that S corporations, LLCs that are taxed as S corporations, partnerships get it. The last version I saw also was that sole proprietorships get it, but I actually haven't seen that in the code yet. So I just saw an article about that. So that was something that was like a really recent rule, because they keep penciling things in margins. So I'm not 100% sure about that. But you don't get it if you're a service-based business, like financial planners and lawyers, So I'm not happy about that. But you do get it if you're a service-based business and you're making under a certain amount of money, depending upon if you're married or single, which amount of money that is. And obviously this is becoming incredibly complicated, right? So, and then what's a service-based business is going to be in the regulations. So the short answer is your taxes might go down, but maybe not. And there's a whole bunch of details. And so we're going to have to really see how it works and whether or not it actually applies to you. But for some people who might have been on the cusp, like you might be a partnership, you might be a sole proprietorship, and you might have not yet formed an LLC taxes as S Corp or a corporation taxes as S Corp. This might be the year where you form that, because you will be saving a lot on taxes. Also, there could be some real creative tax planning that you can do. So I have clients where we actually already have done this, where maybe they own a building and they also have a service-based business aspect of their business as a consultant, let's say. And then they also have a part of their business where they sell products. Maybe they have a book, maybe they sell information products. They have this other part of their business. We may split up their business into multiple entities because they're actually taxed at different rates. And you could do some real creative tax planning. Now, if you're only making $100,000 a year total and all these things, it wouldn't make sense to do because the expenses and running all this stuff would be crazy. But if you're making $1 million a year, then yes, you would want to split this all up to take advantage of all those different tax rates. So, and where the line is between 100,000 and $1 million really depends upon your overall tax situation, what your expenses are. Can we take all the expenses and put it in that consulting business and then just put all the other income in the other businesses? So there may be a lot of creative things that can happen with this because there are going to be so many different tax rates. So you may end up with someone who has an LLC over here, an S corporation over here, a C corporation over here. It does all kinds of really creative things.
Well, that is really good, and that's exciting. So people should be contacting their small business attorney and their accountant to strategize as soon as things are known. But it's probably going to be a couple of different iterations of that because, as you pointed out, the rules may come out later than the bill comes out as signed into law.
Right.
So let's go on to this year. Now we've got to go on. Let's stay in this year, stay in the here and now. And what are some last minute things a small business owner can do to lower their taxes or expenses this year, knowing things are going to change?
Well, the classic thing with lowering your taxes is putting expenses into this year. But whether or not that makes sense also depends upon what tax bracket you're going to be in. And of course, let's assume the tax bill is not going to pass and everything's going to be the same, right? Because this is a really difficult thing to put your mind around. But, a classic thing to do in both personally and in your business is to decide, does it make sense to shift expenses into this year? And that may be something that you may want to do. Because there are times where you can choose whether or not you're going to pay for an expense in the last week of December or on January 2nd. And it depends on how your accounting works for whether or not you need to actually spend the money, like have the money actually go out or just put the check in the mail. So this is something that you would need to check with your accountant on the logistics of how it actually needs to work for you. But so that can make a lot of sense. Whether or not you need to make a distribution to yourself, whether you're going to pay a bonus to your employees, all those kinds of things are things that you may want to do before the end of the year. So I wouldn't make the decision. I wouldn't just spend money. And this is kind of funny thing that some business owners do. Sometimes business owners don't want to pay taxes, so they go spend money on things they don't necessarily need to avoid paying taxes, but that isn't necessarily a good idea. It's more about shifting expenses. Should you pay it in January versus paying it in December?
Okay. So you've been a small business attorney for a number of years now. What's changed over that period of time that you've been practicing as a small business attorney?
When I first started my first iteration of practicing, back when I was doing estate planning and financial planning, actually back um, more than 10 years ago, one of the big things that was different was I only took checks. Doing, running things, you couldn't do things, merchant accounts and having businesses online was something that you really couldn't do. I mean, look at this, right? We couldn't do video calls and stream things over the internet and do marketing that way. That was just something logistically impossible to do. So there's so many things with technology that you can do that are inexpensive or free. My first times I ever did streaming video, I had to pay money for it. I had to pay a service a lot of money every month to be able to stream video online. And now we can obviously do it for free. So there's so many things there's so many technological things that are fundamentally simple and straightforward. But there's some things that are the exact same. I find that the easiest way for me to develop rapport with new clients is to have a one-on-one conversation, especially with someone with it's like a big client, a potential big client who I don't have a personal contact with already. If I want to sign a big client, I need to have a telephone call with them. And I do with my clients remotely, so it's not in person, but and that's the same as it always was, right? So there's some things that are you can do with technology and are high tech, and it's great that I can do my contracts. I signed a new general counsel client today, so I was able to send the contract electronically and do the payment stuff electronically and do all that super simple. But I still had a telephone call to get the client signed, right? Because you still need to have that relationship. So some things change, some things stay the same.
And how about with your clients? What are trends that are changing with your clients over this number of years?
Yeah, with like legal work, I think there's a lot of it is where they get their information. I think, there always were people who would, for example, have template contracts that they got from places. But back in the day, they got their template contracts from, some template they got at Office Depot or whatever, right? Some forms they got, or maybe they got it from a book. Where now they're downloading stuff off some random website off the internet. And who even knows when that contract was written or where they got it from. And then they've used it for some period of time. And then I'm getting this thing. It's like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely terrible. Sometimes they're even buying it from some alleged lawyer and they've paid money for it. And it's still absolutely terrible. So I think that's something that it always existed. People were always getting templates that were sometimes good, sometimes terrible. People were always kind of doing their own legal work that sometimes was okay and sometimes was not. But now it's so much more accessible that it is cost effective to do your own legal work. And sometimes it can be a good way for a brand new business to get off the ground. But it also can be problematic when people are handling things that's not an appropriate thing for them to be handling. So, but it's possible to do now because of technology, or people can find some, blog posts that tells them how to do it. So that tends to be one of the issues.
You've just described the two-edged sword.
Yeah.
Got some advantages and some disadvantages. Well, our time's just about up. Do you have any last-minute suggestions for our viewers as they get ready for a new year?
One of the things I think is a great idea as far as legal stuff is it's a good idea to, whether or not you've had a lawyer help you or not, to this time of year or, once a year to go through your various legal things you've had done, your contracts, your the business entities, your trademarks, and review them even just yourself review them. Because, I've had clients where they have their consulting work or whatever it is they have done, and they haven't actually read their consulting contract themselves, really, since they had it drafted by their attorney 4 years ago. They just put in different numbers and sent it to more of the clients. And a lot of the stuff that's in it isn't actually what they do anymore. How they do business has changed. So reviewing that stuff once a year when you're doing your annual planning, that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times you've become a more sophisticated business. You've learned a lot of lessons. You've had issues with clients where you couldn't collect on money, whatever it was. And then now is a good time for you to update those agreements and take them to another level now that you've learned all those kind of lessons. So it can be a good thing to incorporate into your annual planning.
Well, that's wonderful advice. And I hope our viewers, especially small business owners, will take that advice to heart and do it. Because planning is tough. It's not easy. And it's not always convenient. But it is important. And a lot of times, those of us that have been small business owners recognize, we could have prevented whatever that was just by being a little more problematic about how we do things. So, Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you here. Elizabeth Potts Weinstein is a small business attorney. And if you Google Elizabeth Potts Weinstein, you'll find her on the internet, won't you?
Yeah, you can go to elizabethpw.com.
Perfect. Thank you. And everybody, have a very nice holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all of those holidays, and a very successful new year. This is Jim Ludwig, Main Street Financial Planning, and you've been watching Swim with Jim. Bye, everybody.